it was very much like, I like the X-Men, but at the end of the day, Cyclops is still, an attractive straight white male. It's like, boo-hoo, you have to wear glasses because of your laser eyes, but you could probably go and live a normal life. Like Jean Grey doesn't have to worry about her name sounding foreign on a job application, and Wolverine's not getting, harassed by the police or pulled over because he's driving a nice car. Like, and if he did, it's Wolverine. I mean, we know how that's going to go. But at the same time, these characters, with the exception, like you can like toss in Nightcrawler or something like that. But even that character, whenever he was, trying to fit in or hide in society, he would use that holographic projector to be a white man. And that sort of stuff stuck out to me because knowing what these things are supposed to be analogies for, it's like, all right, Tony Stark takes off his armor and now he's a billionaire. That's his life. Wow. Okay. It's like, as a person of color, you have a number of things. Like as a woman, you have a number of things that they're immutable. You can't not be those things at any given choice. There's no costume to take off.
Let's talk nerdy things like comic books and superheroes with some nerdy peeps, writers, cartoonists, and so much more. So stick around and have some fun with the lovely and adorable Evil Web.
Hello, my sweet ones. Welcome to Titular Characters. I am your adorable host, Eva Webb, and in this issue, we're featuring Kwanza Osajyefo, creator and author of Black, a comic series that explores the question, what if only black people had superpowers? Kwanza has worked in comics for nearly 2 decades. He began his career in Marvel's online department before moving into other media roles. He later returned to comics to launch DC Comics' web imprint and digital publishing initiatives. In addition to his properties, Kwanza is also the creative architect of the H1 line from premier French publisher Humanoids, co-writing their flagship title, Ignited, with comics legend Mark Waid. And today he's here, and we're going to talk to him about all of it. This is going to be fun. Okay, so the question, the good place I like to start these is by asking you where you're from. Where does your creative journey begin?
Wow, nobody's ever asked me that. That's funny. I'm a Brooklyn native. I grew up in a neighborhood that some people know about now, Park Slope, Brooklyn. It wasn't quite as well known back then. And I was someone who, at a very young age, was just attracted to books and reading. Like I loved going to the library. The Park Slope Public Library is a cherished place in my heart. And that kind of led to a love of comic books and eventually wanting to, make them.
That's awesome. What was your first memory of comics?
I think my very first memory of like reading a comic book was there used to be these encyclopedias based on like Peanuts. I think it was called Encyclopedia Brown. And my mom had gotten me one. They were selling them at the supermarket, and she bought me one when I was like, I think 2 years old. And I think I read that thing so many times that I could like recite it at a certain point. And after that, I was just hooked. Like anytime there was like any sort of comic books like around, like that's just something I gravitated towards. Like I loved novels and like text written books, but comic books were always something special. So it was like Archie, Pogo, Garfield, anything. I remember when I was probably still in grammar school, my mom got me a little sort of like Punkabone sized Teen Titans book that was in a thrift shop for like $1. And man, I think I read the spine off of that book. Maybe there was some coloring that happened too.
Nice. I've been through that. I understand it very, very well. So, what was your first professional experience in comics?
I think my first, I don't know, like professional as in like professional work, like the first professional thing that I did.
Yeah, sure. Or whatever makes sense to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first time that I even knew that it was a profession, that it was a job, was probably when I was like in my like mid to late teens, and I had picked up a copy of some Milestone comics, and that was the first time I sort of realized as a comic book reader that there was this absence of people of color in comics. Because when you're a kid, you kind of just you're a kid, you're reading this stuff, and the world is the way that it is, and you don't really take notice of who Spider-Man is, because Spider-Man could be anybody. But I saw these comics and it kind of blew my mind, because these were stories about characters who were very familiar. Like they had backstories, in places that seemed like people I knew, and places I grew up, and family members that I had, and like I was so like blown away by it that it was the first time I kind of noticed the creative credits, and it was just like, oh, this is made by people, and they have an address, and they foolishly have a phone number printed right here in the comic book. So I
That is
called
beautiful.
Milestone and told them that I was the hot new artist, and that they really needed to look at my portfolio that I did not have. And, they actually invited me up to their offices to pitch my work. So I found like a portfolio in the trash, and cobbled together all of like my art and like scribblings and writings and ideas, and showed up for this interview as professional looking as probably a 16-year-old or 17-year-old maybe could look. And they sat me down with their editor-in-chief, Dwayne McDuffie, and it was a wild moment because I had no idea who he was, but in person he just had like an authority and an energy that I knew that I was talking to somebody who, was about to change my life. And that's kind of what happened, because he looked over my stuff and very graciously told me that I was not ready to work in comics. But, instead of just like kicking me out after realizing I was, like in the middle of high school, he asked me why I wanted to even work in comic books. And for like the next half hour, he basically told me how to break in. He and kind of gave me what I call the green book for navigating the industry, because he was very upfront about the fact that like Milestone's over here and not at EC for a reason. Like, this publisher exists for a reason, and while you might have these ambitions, there's ways that you're going to need to navigate them as a person of color. But on top of that, let me tell you which conventions to go to, what editors to hit up, how to get an internship. And I basically had, like the cheat sheet, that probably no teenager at that time had. And when I was in college, I applied to the Marvel internship program and got in, but I also got accepted to study abroad in Japan. So I picked that instead, because it's like, Marvel will be here, but Japan, that's kind of that's an extra once in a lifetime experience. But I got in the second time. So like my senior year of college, I got into the internship program and then was hired straight out of college to work in Marvel Online. And I think that's kind of the long story of my first professional experience.
That's amazing. What was going through your head when that first time you walked into Marvel?
I think, it was like I imagined that I was about to walk into what would be the equivalent of Disneyland, and mind you, this is before Disney bought Marvel. And it was not, definitely it was not that, because they had just come out of their bankruptcy. So it was quite a different atmosphere than what I expected it to be. But it was really great, because I think in order to become who I am now, I needed to see the industry without the rosy colored glasses and stuff like that, in order to really understand what I wanted to do and where I felt like my place should be. And like that experience really sort of like affirmed like my viewpoint on the comics, industry, and like, how I thought I would eventually try to make my mark.
So, what are you working on right now?
Too many things. I kind of, after my stint working with humanoids on the H1 line that I developed for them, I kind of decided to, take a break, sort of, because I also, in the midst of that break, launched a Kickstarter for the sequel to Black, White, and have been working on the fulfillment for that right now. But creatively speaking, I've just been kind of working on various things. So I'm working on a children's book, I'm working on a survival horror story, and then some other takes on, like, I guess, other takes on superheroism that I'm trying to explore, where I'm really trying to figure out the best way to not go down the beaten path and tell stories like that. So yeah, too many things, but all creative, but they don't have deadlines on them, so I can kind of like have my way with them, because that's what I felt like I needed, is just create for the sake of creating.
That's the best. So that's actually a really good sort of interlude into my next question, and that was, where does creativity come from for you? Where do you find your zen?
That is a good question, because I think I had to take a step back and find that again, because when I created Black initially, it wasn't the first idea that I wanted to put out into the world. It just happened to be the one that I picked, because my wife essentially, I would always rattle off all these ideas I had, but she's like, these all sound fantastic. Just pick one. It's like, it doesn't really, just pick one and go after that one. And it's almost like I kind of threw a dart at my, like, book of stuff, and it was Black. But back then I was creating without any sort of notoriety, and that was a different place than like after people kind of recognized my work or my name, where you're kind of trying to like create against something you've done before, which is not a place that I ever thought I'd be or wanted to be. So for me, creation or creativity comes from, it's almost like out of nowhere in some respect. Like I need that blank canvas. I need to not be thinking about necessarily the other thing in order to like produce something that I really feel like is coming from a place where I kind of have free reign to explore, to think almost like when you're a kid again, where it's like things aren't necessarily linear, things aren't necessarily coherent, but you're trying to coalesce it into something that like is an actual like story and stuff like that, but have fun exploring all the different avenues.
So, Black was just this incredibly influential book. It had its own look to it. At the time, I remember when I first picked it up, like the first issue of Black when it came out, I opened it up and it's just starkly black and white. I thought that was a really interesting creative decision for the book. I mean, you obviously could have gone with color.
Yeah, that was on purpose. I mean, I felt like the topic matter of Black really would have, it would have, if it would have been in full color, I think that would have distracted from the story a lot. I'm also a big fan of like manga, and like, I like black and white comic books. I like comic books that are kind of, they ask you to focus a little bit more on the story, in order for you to like get invested in it, as opposed to like a lot of like eye candy and sensation that's just, cool. I love color comics too, but for something like Black, I felt like, a sort of narrative that's in that, touching that realm of superheroism, it needed to be in black and white, because we're talking about what if only Black people had superpowers. And I think that can be kind of like heavy.
Did you expect just the crazy reaction that happened when you published Black?
No, I definitely did not. I mean, when we launched the Kickstarter, like, I had prepared like most people for like, going long haul. It's like I got to convince everybody. Just I felt like I was going to be like those dudes selling mixtapes like on the sidewalk. Where it's just like you're just hustling and stuff. But after 3 days, we completely hit our goal. On the first day we were like, I think we were like a third of the way there, maybe over a third of the way there, and like we had already been started getting like movie offers, and people were like hitting up my inbox and stuff, or trying to get in contact with me. So it was really wild, because I felt like it was an interesting idea, but I didn't realize how much it would capture people's attention.
It's great. The story building, the world building around Black, and the character studies within the book are extremely compelling. You pick it up and you just get lost in this world.
Oh, thank you. I feel like I feel like sometimes I get a little lost in it too, because I was trying to build something that was rich and deep, but also as a creative, like not play into a lot of some of the tropes that kind of go into that kind of story where I'm feeling a need to explain everything to people, particularly because I felt like with the main character Kareem being sort of dropped into the middle of this world, that's not necessarily a world where people are going to stop and give you all of the details, in some respect on purpose, but also because it's just sort of like really bombastic kind of dynamic with superpowered Black people and clandestine like factions, like sort of having these conflicts that the rest of the world doesn't know about. There's a lot of space in there for a young person to just kind of get lost in it and try and find their way as like best they can.
What inspired it? What was the genesis of Black?
I think it was a mix of both my professional experience working in comic books, but also my love of the medium and the things that I've read growing up. I think for a lot of people who are comic book fans and readers, they gravitate towards these characters because they sort of represent this otherness that any young person may feel growing up, regardless of whatever groups or cliques that you're in. Like your body's changing, the world is changing, you're moving from like adolescence to adulthood like really rapidly, and everything just feels weird and serious, and you just feel like no one understands, and that you're different. And so you gravitate to characters like, the X-Men, you gravitate to characters like Spider-Man, or you feel like you need to have control like Batman and stuff. So those sort of things, always spoke to me as a kid. And I think, becoming a professional and like having seen the milestone stuff and, realizing that there wasn't just a lack of people of color in that content, but there was a lack of people of color and women and LGBTQ working at these companies. So there was no stewardship that represented me or, people I knew. And that had a direct correlation to why I think these characters are absent from the content. And that struck me, because it was very much like, I like the X-Men, but at the end of the day, Cyclops is still, an attractive straight white male. It's like, boo-hoo, you have to wear glasses because of your laser eyes, but you could probably go and live a normal life. Like Jean Grey doesn't have to worry about her name sounding foreign on a job application, and Wolverine's not getting, harassed by the police or pulled over because he's driving a nice car. Like, and if he did, it's Wolverine. I mean, we know how that's going to go. But at the same time, these characters, with the exception, like you can like toss in Nightcrawler or something like that. But even that character, whenever he was, trying to fit in or hide in society, he would use that holographic projector to be a white man. And that sort of stuff stuck out to me because knowing what these things are supposed to be analogies for, it's like, all right, Tony Stark takes off his armor and now he's a billionaire. That's his life. Wow. Okay. It's like, as a person of color, you have a number of things. Like as a woman, you have a number of things that they're immutable, you can't not be those things at any given choice. There's no costume to take off. And it made me think like, man, like with all these characters for like, decades that have predominantly been white, predominantly been guys, it's like, what if only black people had superpowers? And like literally that was kind of like the train of thought. And I was like, whoa, wait, what if? And then I think around that time was after the murder of Amadou Diallo, I really thought like, Jesus, like what if he had superpowers? And like, or what if he had superpowers and those cops knew he had superpowers? So, the idea just started tumbling out immediately after that. So those are sort of the origins of it. And that was probably about like 15 years ago that I kind of had that idea. It's between me working at Marvel and then DC. But when I got hired at DC, I decided to kind of focus on those projects and put, Black and other stuff on the back burner. But after I left, times had changed. There was things like Kickstarter. There was ways to like self-publish. And I just decided to try and put it out into the world.
So, how do your characters, and you have some great characters in here, by the way, they are absolutely just fantastic. How do they find their voice?
It's weird. It's all, it's kind of, sometimes it's kind of like tapping into like you're a multiple personality disorder as a writer, where it's like you're trying to get into the head of these characters. And I tend to write character profiles first, like a detail, like a psych profile on them, to kind of guide me, so that when I'm writing them in a story, I already know sort of how they might react to a given situation. So I'm writing them before I'm writing the situation that they're in, so that I can kind of see how they might react to it. And it's a sort of thing where you end up exploring little pieces of yourself, in a sense, where it's like you try to think like, oh, well, what if I was like, really, militant Black person who, felt like we need to like establish our own nation, but at the cost of like another one that had oppressed us? Or what if I, was just a teen who suddenly is like, hey, you got superpowers. Oh, and you got like God mode superpowers. So good luck with that. It's like, what? I'm just trying to, meet girls, boys. Like, I don't know. It's sort of like that. I try to like tap into that stuff. And even like some of the, supporting characters, like I draw from like people I know. So a lot of the characters in Black are based on like family members or amalgamations of them, and just things I grew up and had never seen in comics. Like, like I'd never seen like gospel music sang in a comic book before. I'd never seen like, the South, where part of my family is from, depicted in the way that I knew it, in comics. And it was really a lot of trying to draw upon that sort of stuff. Like even setting, the beginning of the book in Bed-Stuy, which, I didn't grow up in, but I had family who lived there that I spent a lot of time with, and just thinking about that neighborhood and what it was like then or what it's like now, and just trying to like tie to those places that people don't often think of, because a lot of times in comic books people, or they just kind of blanketly say like New York, Queens, like, and they're all different. They're different kinds of neighborhoods. They have a different vibe to them, and that's something I definitely in future work I want to super focus in on, like that small stuff, because I think that's where a lot of the magic in storytelling happens. It's a lot of the stuff that like I feel like meant something to me as a kid, like growing up and reading stuff like The Lion, The Witch and the Wardrobe, where it's like that started off someplace that was kind of big but also very small, for those kids, that then like opened up into like a much bigger thing, which is always like the fun part. It's like you focus on something that's really like mundane or like really usual, in order to make the unusual even more fantastic.
That's amazing. So would you say you're the kind of writer that sits down and meticulously plans every move? Or do you just start writing and go?
It depends. Like I kind of like, so I use this Google app called Keep, which is essentially just like post-it notes on crack. And I just kind of sometimes I'll sit down, but a lot of the times I'm just constantly just like posting notes, little bits and pieces of stuff. And then because it's Google, like I'm able to organize and like sort through them with search. I'll sit down and kind of like look at all of the nonsense that I might have posted in any over any amount of time, and sometimes try to decipher what the hell I was thinking. It's just like, what is this note? What am I talking about here? Why do I need a Rosetta Stone for myself? And sometimes I'll even find like old gems, things that I just kind of like rattled off, like, and didn't even realize I had thrown in there. And I'm just like, oh, wow, that sparked a really interesting idea. Let me come back and explore that. So my process, I kind of try and like keep scattered and then focus like later on.
Well, what inspires you?
Um, that's an interesting question lately because that's definitely been something I've been trying to tap back into. It's weird because I tend to find inspiration is almost like my favorite book is Alice in Wonderland. And I live for those Alice in Wonderland moments where I just start tumbling into the creative, where it's like one little thing and then I'm just kind of on a roll through any number of like avenues and stories and like ideas. So what inspires me is usually something that can spark that, like finding kind of like that white rabbit to chase after, or that looking glass to like pass through. I think those are the things that like I always kind of remember as a child, and what I remember about being, a child is like kids never need that much to spark their animation. Like a kid can take like your house keys and just like go on an adventure with your house keys and trying to like keep that sort of like attitude or that sort of sense of wonder or imagination, like especially as you get older as an adult and all the adult things come into the way. It's like that's the thing that I constantly try to like reach back into, where it's just like what where can I find that like weird little quirky thing that's just going to capture my brain, and lead me down into an adventure.
That is the best answer I've ever gotten to that question. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
So, how do you approach diversity and representation when you write?
I think I try, if it's not something that I know, I try to find out, what I can, or if I am going to put it into a story, I try to be respectful from a distance. So like in Black, I, have a transgender character, and it's like at the time, like I didn't know enough that I felt that I could flesh that character out, but I wanted them to still exist in that world, because maybe it would be a story for someone else to explore later, or maybe I might come back to it. But I think, it's not the most difficult thing to, do your work as a writer. And if you want to go down a certain path, or, include a character that has a certain type of background as it's relevant to the story, to put it in, there. Um, I think for me, it's just kind of a natural thing to do. And, I'm very much on my Jordan Peele kind of, lane, where I'm like, yeah, I'm just making characters who are underrepresented. Like, I'm not trying to like, go out and make the next Superman like that. There's enough of that guy, and I don't mean that in any sort of disparaging way. I love Superman. I actually think he's a fantastic and inspirational character, but I mean, like, he's Superman, so the world doesn't need two, not necessarily, So I really try to diversify, not just for representation but also just for creativity, because there's so many cultures and stories and identities and genders and sexualities that just haven't been represented, and just offers such a fresh territory to explore, that for me it just seems like the natural course to pursue.
So we live in this world now where digital is very, very prominent. And in fact, some comics are only being released in digital. I imagine it's one of those realities that's unavoidable as a writer. But does it change the way you think about your stories and the way you create them when you're thinking about digital?
Yeah, I mean, I started my career in comics and digital, and that's always been, the area that I love to go back to. And I've been somewhat surprised that digital has not taken off, but I think in some respect that's been because what's happened is digital is essentially just mimicked print, and it hasn't necessarily done thoughtfully what digital can do. You know, and I don't mean like, adding animations and crazy sound effects and a bunch of nonsense just for the sake of doing it, but, actually looking at the medium and doing something akin to like, for example, like Webtoon. Like Webtoon is a strictly digital, platform. And I think a lot of its success comes from the fact that it doesn't try to be anything else. you know you read by scrolling up and down, and that's how the story progresses. But other than that, it doesn't change the dynamic of reading. It's still in your head. You're still reading it, but it's just a slightly different flow in terms of navigation. So for digital, I think that i I would love to only personally do stuff in digital if I could get away with it. Like I really would. That's an honest truth. Like I would, and that's not to say that I don't love books, and I've thought of ways that they can translate back and forth. But in my heart of hearts, I would like for you know my comics to be digital and maybe collected into nifty hardcovers. Because I love a good hardcover. No offense, paperbacks, you're awesome, but like for the bookshelf, it's like a big fat hardcover is like something special.
It really is, and especially for comics.
Yeah,
So your preference then would be digital over paper.
yeah. I mean, I think at least for like you know periodical stuff, chapters and what have you. Like I subscribe to Shonen Jump, and that has been brilliant. I was like, really? So you're gonna give me all the comics for like $2 a month? This is fantastic.
Oh yeah, that's the best thing in the world. What's your favorite comic book or comic book series of all time?
Oh my god, that's tough. That's tough, but I'm gonna go with the first thing that popped into my head, which is gonna be weird because it's not my usual answer, but it's Death, the High Cost of Living.
Oh yes, great title. Neil
And I
Gaiman at his best.
Yeah. Neil Gaiman and I think Steve Bichello was the artist back then. Yeah. Or Chris Bichello. I don't know. I'm forgetting names all of a sudden. But yeah, like I mean my favorite comic book that's so special to my heart is Power Pack, but I think Death, the High Cost of Living was like that one hit. That's the one that like just hit for me is like, a moody tween routine.
Yeah, that's like one of the formative books I think of my early teenagehood myself. So what are you reading right now?
Um, right now, I've actually been trying to catch up on One Piece. So I never liked it. Like I just couldn't get into it, and then finally, like I was like, I've got to be crazy because everybody loves this comic series. So I'm gonna catch up, and I've been doing that with a few mangas. Like I blew through Demon Slayer, I blew through Black Clover and stuff. I was like, all right, One Piece, I'm finally gonna do it. So it's been good because when there's like 1,000 chapters to get to, you kind of like it's like I've always got something to read. So that's been what's been like the thing that I'm reading the most of now. I also went back to finish up reading East of West and finishing up on a Sunbeam. So those are the things that I'm reading right now.
Nice. So in your personal opinion, and I don't want to get you in trouble here, but who do you feel is like the most underrated and or most inspiring creator in comics?
Underrated. I don't know because I think people have been getting their due lately. Because we have the internet, and maybe I'm biased just because I know a lot of these people, so I know their work and stuff like that. But um, somebody who I think I would like to see doing more mainstream work is like Alex DeCampi, because she's a brilliant creator and writer, and she's like extremely driven, you know. And it's one of those people who it's like I'm surprised when I don't see their name on a a Marvel or a DC book. It's just like I see other people's names in there, and I'm just like, no, and that's not shade. I'm just kind of like, it's like you could have picked this person though, and I think someone who I think is definitely due for a little bit more mainstream shine.
So, are you a cat person or a dog person?
Ooh, that's weird because I would have said that I was neither, even though I've had both. I had a cat most of my life, and now I have a dog, which I never thought I would. And I think it's made me a dog person. Yeah.
Nice.
So I'm a convert. Or maybe I'm biped. I don't know. Or panpetual. Panpetual. That's
Is that a word?
Yeah, I just made it up.
I love it. That's beautiful. We should copyright that. So, what's your favorite food?
Geez. I'm trying to think because the thing is, like, I have a weird sort of Einsteinian habit of forgetting to eat because I'll just get into something like so deep that like I don't notice hunger and thirst and all that stuff. So it's like I'm the butt of many jokes when it comes to like actually nourishing myself. But I do have a horrible sweet tooth for like cake or pie, especially like any sort of like French or Japanese pastries. Like I will eat all of them. If you took me to a French pastry shop, like I would go house, or like a Japanese one, it'd just be over.
Nice. What's the best swear word?
The best swear word. Oh, there's so many that I use, but I think I like twat. English British pronunciation. It's just something about that one where it's just like you feel like you could kind of say it to anybody, and it doesn't have like it's not like the C word where it's just like sometimes you might use that towards somebody and like a woman that's not cool, or B word, or like you use those words and it's just kind of like it has a lot of room for undertone. But twat is just you saying like you're just being like unbearable right now, but I don't want to use a multi-syllable word like unbearable. Just
I love
being
it.
a twat.
That's fantastic. Okay, so you wake up one morning and you're imbued with superpowers. What are those powers, and what do you choose to do with them?
Super speed, and as boring as it might sound, I think I would write furiously because I can do it in record time, and then travel because now I can run to wherever I want to be. But I need like that Flash kind of super speed, with the Speed Force. It's like I don't know how that
So
works.
you never get tired.
Yeah. I don't want to have to take breaks. I just want to Speed Force it there and write a book, Speed Force it somewhere else. But yeah, I would probably have the longest catalog of books in history.
That would be amazing. So do you see yourself as a superhero in that situation, or an antihero, or a villain, or somebody who just isn't especially heroic?
With that particular power set, I imagine that I would do heroic things in the moment, but I have certain proclivities when it comes towards like government and governance that I think I would have to abstain from abusing said powers in that regard. So like, saving somebody from moving car, yeah. Trying not to take over the government, okay. Gonna go write this book instead. Because like that guy's a prick and shouldn't have his job. And if I could super speed to find out all of the dirt on him and expose it on the internet, I would do that.
That would be beautiful.
Yeah.
That would be great. That would be the kind of superhero I could support, definitely.
Yeah, like no costume either. Just be like, my superhero name would be like, here's all your business on the internet. And my name would be on blast. Nice. That's my superhero name.
Oh boy, that's perfect. That's perfect. Okay, so 100 years from now, NASA throws your entire creative output into a space capsule. Sometime later in deep space, aliens find it and they read your work. What's their thought? What do they think?
I think they would think that if they personalized it to me, that like I really wanted people to imagine worlds better, more interesting, more, you know, fun, more engaging, because that's what a lot of this was for me growing up, was just a bit of escapism, you know. I think that's what I always loved about books growing up as a kid, was that, you could just be somewhere else. It's like why, aside from that one part, I really love Bridge of Terabithia, which I realized as an adult that I completely suppressed that memory until I saw the film, and then I was crying like a baby. I was like, no, I forgot that happens. So, yeah, totally repressed that. So I think that's what aliens are thinking, that, the Earth's culture is one that really tried to, inspire the imagination.
That's amazing. So I guess that's it, Kwanzaa. Where can people find you online?
If you want to find me on Instagram or Twitter, my handle is at Kwanzer, Kwancer. And my not so developed website is KwanzaOsajyefo.com.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to thank you for just being such a gracious guest and taking the time to be on our humble little podcast.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thanks for asking me. I really appreciate it. It was nice to be on your hit list.
Oh yeah. This is a bucket list item for sure. Definitely. Awesome. And I had a ton of fun. This was awesome. Wasn't that amazing? I just want to close the show by thanking the most important person in the universe. That's you. Hey, it's really important that you remember that you are beautiful. You are valid. And we appreciate you. This show would not be possible without your downloads and donations and all of the love you send us all the time. Titular Characters is a 49.11 mile long, that's 79.03 kilometer state highway located in the southern tier of New York. Just kidding. It's a podcast. It's produced and hosted by the adorable Eva Webb. That's me. Podcast art by Alexiva. She's back. We love her. She's amazing. Opening theme by Antonia Marquis. Closing theme by Mikey Flash and Speed Force Music. Sound services by Brogan Malloy. And that's it, my babies. That's all we got. Join us next time for another exciting adventure in cyberspace. Love ya. Bye.